As far as I know, we're live. So, welcome to Great Employees Matter, the weekly podcast that focuses on the personal development of employees and the professional approach of employers, which in tandem results in more confident individuals, more employee-centric leadership, and greater success for all concerned. My name is Jimmy Bingham, and I, along with my founders, Kobe Dumas and Lloyd Dix, are thrilled to be able to have a much anticipated great conversation with our guest of the week, Dr. Ginger Carlson. Dr. Carlson is an influential educator, leader, and an innovator with over 30 years of global experience, not just domestic. As an international TEDx and keynote speaker, she has captivated audiences worldwide with her profound insights into creativity, communication, growth, and transformation. With a widely diverse and extensive background that includes living and working on count them, five continents, Ginger's expertise and always widening perspective is unparalleled. She has authored award-winning publications, holds advanced certifications in coaching and communication, adaptive models of change and habits of mind, and as well holds advanced degrees from Pepperdine University, Johns Hopkins University, and wait for it, the University of Southern California. Ta-da! My alma mater, one of Lloyd's favorite schools. As co-founder of Möbius Dynamics and CEO of the Multarity Project, Ginger's pioneering efforts are dedicated to bridging cultural and ideological divides and reshaping our approaches in dialogue, data visualization, and empathy, which is where we're going to come into today at some point. Continuously seeking innovative ways to foster organizational growth and societal impact, Dr. Carlson is a dynamic force in driving transformation. So as you can tell from that intro, she is really, really smart and brings a lot to the table. And that's why we're so in such anticipation of what a great podcast this is going to be. And now that my hair is all messed up, Dr. Carlson, we're just going to turn it over to you and ask you to share with us your story, how you got to this point and how you created the Multarity Project. And from that, we'll just have this conversation and enjoy the afternoon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I've been also anticipating this. You guys are super fun to talk with. And so I just have been really looking forward to this. Just as far as background, as you said, you already introduced me that I have this global education background, and it really came from that background of being around a lot of different types of people, a lot of different systems, and realizing that we weren't really honoring those systems. And so I have this background in coaching and collaborative work, and also conflict and dealing with conflict in organizational environments and the systems that create that. And I'm also a social scientist, so diving into the research and looking at, well, how do we really look at conflict in unique ways, and how do we understand the different perspectives that sit around a table? And I realized that we were really kind of polarized. And we say that all the time, that like the world is so divided, the world is so polarized. And so I started thinking about that word of polarities and polarity management in, leadership. We talk about polarity management all the time, and managing the poles in a room and in a discussion or in a problem that we're trying to solve. And I started looking at it and said, you know what, we really have multiple perspectives. And so let's see if we can visualize those and see where we go with that. So that's a little bit of background.
And I want to start. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep. Perfect.
Okay, good. Okay, I want to start by backing up just a little bit. Jimmy likes to go super fast, right? And so I want to slow down just a little bit. And I'm going to ask you a couple of more direct questions about your journey in your personal life. I like to introduce people, and so the audience in the network knows who they're talking to. So I'd like to start way before that. I'd like to start at the beginning as far as who is Ginger Carlson. Like, where'd you grow up?
Yeah. I'll back up to where Jimmy left off and just say fight on.
Yeah, he's hey,
USC.
that's gonna be one of the main things that he talks about today is he's gonna make sure that USC is at the top of the list.
Yeah. Yeah.
So of the conversation,
USC.
but no,
Yep.
I want
It
you to go
often
back.
is in my conversations too.
Oh, that's so funny. So I got two of you guys today.
Yeah, it's been a unique connection, right? It's one of the things that we connected on so much. But it just going back to your question, I came from a very small town, rural Nevada. That's where I was born and raised, and kind of got to the point where I was graduating from high school and wanted more and wanted to go and see the world. And so I did go to Pepperdine, did my undergraduate there, and then a master's degree. Started working in South Central Los Angeles, not very far from USC, actually. It was one of my first introductions to USC is that I was took a teaching job in South Central Los Angeles right around the time that the riots happened there.
You said a teaching job?
Yeah, a teaching job.
Teaching job. Okay.
I was working in as an elementary school teacher. I've always been super passionate about education and what kind of environments we're creating for young people to think and learn and be creative. That's where I started thinking about the science of creativity and the conditions that lead to that. And then decided to go overseas. And so I really wanted to kind of see the world and taste it and go and learn about, different perspectives.
See, so this is more what I'm talking about. I want to find this out. Now, before we dive too deep, what you mentioned in your childhood, did something happen in your childhood that made you want to go into teaching, or who?
Yeah, I had. I feel like I lost you guys. Are you? There you are. Okay.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
So we lost everything for a second. Yeah, some kind of a glitch. But what influenced you to start going into education? Was it your parents or were your parents educators? How was your
Actually, I come from an engineering background. So my father was an engineer and also an entrepreneur at the same time, had he was an engineer and owned a construction company, but also owned a restaurant and a ranch and different things, and kind of had his hands in a lot of things. And I had always been brought up, in the math and sciences and thinking that I was going to go into engineering. And I had a couple of teachers that influenced me along the way that were very impactful to me. I actually just had an interesting experience where I got to address one of my childhood idols of what education and what learning could look like. And that was actually the son of Frank Zappa, his son Dweezil Zappa. I just was reconnected with him. And that came from a conversation with my teacher and a project that I did with my 8th grade English teacher. And so I got to this point where I was like, you know what, there's something else out there. And I took my first job, actually, was as a ski instructor at a local ski resort in the Lake Tahoe area where I grew up. And I started working with students who had physical challenges, physical disabilities, or just differences, and I became enamored by how can I create the conditions for these young people to go to ski and enjoy the mountain the way that I enjoyed it. So that's kind of how I got into the idea that I wanted to go into education. And I've always just been, I think as a young child, I also, my parents created an environment at the dinner table, actually, that, was questioning ideas and talking about, current events and what was going on in the news. And they were very opinionated, and that helped us to kind of develop some ideas and learn how to work with and talk with people who maybe have different opinions than we do.
Speaking of innovative approaches to dialogue, right?
Right.
So now I understand a little bit better of why because I thought that the topic was fascinating, right? Because a lot of people don't talk about dialogue, they don't talk about communication. It's just kind of out there. And a lot of times, like yesterday, we had a really bad miscommunication on my part, and the intention was not nowhere near what my intention was not nowhere near what was communicated, and it caused a lot of problems. So I think this is an important topic that you do. So I just wanted to kind of get a background of who you are, so the audience knows who we're talking to. Jimmy, why don't you go with the next question, or Lloyd?
Well, speaking of USC, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Lloyd.
Oh, Lloyd's mute. He's muted. Hold on, I got him.
I've been waiting for Lloyd.
I'm here.
Because Lloyd is the one who I was also a softball player, and Lloyd promised me he would give me a real easy question.
Which is better, USC or UCLA?
She did the lob. She did the lob too, guys. She did the lob too. That's funny.
And just so I can join the conversation and actually participate meaningfully, both my parents met while they were students at USC. So I too have the same affinity and grew up yelling "fight on." Communication is one of those skills which we all take for granted and which never seems to work. It is one of those things where we learn how to speak when we're kids. In my profession as a lawyer, I found that the most common thing was that people were waiting for the other person to finish speaking so that they could make their point instead of listening to what the other person is saying. What are the most common mistakes that you see with regards to communication?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up about, waiting till someone is done so they can make their point, which instead of like receiving the information. And I think that is, it's a huge thing because we often don't create space for people to really kind of think and process what another person is saying. And I think it's dangerous. Another thing that I think often gets in the way is that we don't assume positive intent, which is, I think, one of our, it's a huge challenge to assume that someone is coming to a conversation with their most kind of human essence being there and bringing that they also want a positive outcome, or that they, aren't there to destroy you, and so coming to a conversation with some kind of assumption that we are all human is a huge challenge that we.
Boy, especially in this day and age, right? When I was a kid, no politician would ever dream of being disrespectful to another politician for fear that it would come back at him. This time, if you don't have something good to say about somebody, put it on the internet.
Right.
And I don't understand. Is there a particular reason for this paradigm shift in how we treat people and the way that us old folks grew up?
Yeah, I think a lot of people would point to the advent of social media, that we're hiding behind that kind of wall of the internet. And it's easy to make those comments, but also we've lost kind of the understanding that humans and their dignity is their, basic human right.
That explains to me how it is that they do this. They can do this because they feel comfortable hiding behind the anonymity, but it doesn't explain to me why they do it. I have no desire to lambast anybody on the internet. I have no idea. No, if I don't like somebody or I don't like something, it's not incumbent on me to insult them or to go out of my way. And yet a lot of people feel compelled to do that. Is that a societal change? Is that a change in our mores and our values? Do you have an explanation for it?
Yeah, I guess that I would say that there's something in psychology and sociology that points to the fact that if you say something bad about somebody else, that it somehow lifts you up and makes you better than them. And so a lot of that would just point to the fact that we are a society that we don't feel good about ourselves. we often are trying to prove ourselves. And
okay. Yeah, and for my softball question, which I promised, which is going to be easier to solve, the Ukraine war or the Israeli war?
oh my goodness.
In 25 words or less.
I wish I had that. I wish I had a company that could help with saying that one was going to be easy, and I think that was maybe the tricky word, is that none of them are going to be easy to solve in any of these conflicts that we have in our world right now.
Hey, Lloyd, I think she hit it out of the park with that answer.
I would agree. Jimmy, your turn.
Let's bring the conversation a little closer to home with regard to employees and employers. So you'd mentioned that we deal with, and you specifically deal with, conflict in the workplace. There's conflict in the workplace, and what causes the polarization that creates that conflict? Are there, what are the top three things that causes that, and what can we do to instruct our audience on how to avoid them or manage them?
Yeah, I would say the number one thing is not recognizing that there are lots of gradients and multiple perspectives around any particular idea. And then another one would be that we view conflict as something that needs to be ended, and that something that is not valued, that it means that we're bumping up against somebody and we don't like what you have to say. And when we're able to shift how we talk about conflict and how we talk about possible opposing views or differing perspectives as a way to build understanding, then we can actually have progress and not divide people in an organization. So that basically, when we value their voice and their perspective, and that their voice and perspective comes from a place of experience, it comes from something that is of value to us to move the organization ahead, to keep striving towards our goals. And when we can value that conflict and help people understand that we value them, bringing up an idea that we hadn't thought of before, and go, wow, that's something to think about. What can we do with that idea?
I like that answer, and I think this question that our guest Sachi has put up. What are some of the biggest challenges you've encountered when trying to bridge divides, and how do you overcome them? Because I think a lot of people go through a lot of challenges that are not necessary, and the breakdown is just simple communication. How do you approach that?
Yeah. I think I do a lot of work with the idea of bridging divides, that we have one person on, or a group on one side and a group on the other, and to help understand that. And it really comes down to what you said at the beginning about building empathy, right? And creating space that builds empathy. And when we attempt to put people in those boxes of, you're one side or the other, that is the biggest challenge to building any kind of a bridge. But empathy is that bridge.
I was just getting ready to ask, what role does empathy play?
Yeah. To me, empathy is, it's often thought of as like a soft word in business. But it's everything in how we, it's what design thinking is rooted in. And we're actually doing some work right now where we're bridging the principles of design thinking with multarity thinking, because it makes, that's where solving problems, that's where you start, is helping or working to understand what your customer needs, where they're coming from, what your employees need, where they're coming from, and to begin to build that understanding. And so a lot of the work that we're doing with the Multarity Project is for empathy. It's to build a more empathetic world so that because we have what's been called an empathy deficit in our world. In the last 50 years, empathy has been, on the decline. And we're less empathetic now than we have since it's been tracked.
Wow. And how about the question from Dale, where he asked, what method would you suggest to help addressing the problems and not the person? I think that's a great question, because if we attack the problem, then the people fall into place.
Right. So one method is that you're keeping it about the problem, right? A very kind of short answer to that is that we're, depersonalizing. And so in the way that we communicate, in the way that we talk about an idea, and in, the science of it is like it's a third point, that your problem is the third point, not the person who you're having the challenge with. And so keeping your whatever the challenge is as the third point, you're talking about this other thing, not the person who delivered the opinion, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's how we facilitate those conversations.
Nice.
So within the Multarity Project, you do a lot of research centered around those concepts, right? And the bridge of empathy, or using empathy as a bridge, and all the communication points. So do you, or does the Multarity Project collectively go out and teach organizations that, or do they just provide the information, in some type of a general forum for the employers or the employees to access?
Yeah. Thanks for asking that, because actually, if I could back up a little bit and just give a little overview of what
Please.
the Multarity Project is. And so it's actually expanding. I mean, the idea is that we're bringing people together to talk about some of our biggest challenges, but also just what it means to be human. It started as this Multarity Project where we brought people together in small groups that to talk about an idea as a third point. And through that structured dialogue experience, we create visualizations using symbology, using artificial intelligence, machine learning to kind of listen into the conversation, and then create symbols that represent the different pieces of the conversation. It's a very structured process. We actually run open, public, free sessions once a month so that anybody can kind of get a snapshot of what it is and just have a transformative experience as a human being. We started it really with the idea that, what a contribution it would be if we got people together to work on the hardest of human problems. But as far as like the types of groups that we work with outside of our public sessions, because we also have what we're calling Multarity pop-ups. They're going to be starting where it's kind of live streamed Multarity sessions in public places around the US. We're going to do, our first one is going to be in Boston Common, and which will be coming up pretty soon. And but as far as groups that we're working with, they range from, corporations to schools to organizations that are supporting trauma victims. There's a lot, and also mental health spaces. That it's anybody who has an issue that we go in and teach a couple of things: Multarity thinking as a process, like how do you get all of the perspectives around the room, and then we visualize that. And so that visual component really is the crux of what makes it special, what makes it unique. And then we also teach what we call conflict evolution, and we do hold the trademark on all of those: Multarity thinking, Multarity Project, and conflict evolution, and teach how do we go from seeing conflict as something that we want to end to using it as a resource, and where the opportunities exist to collaborate and be more creative and to build empathy.
Now, I'm not going to date myself, but with technology and with big data, how do you see both of those helping or hindering efforts to create meaningful dialogue?
Yeah, but I mean, for us, it is a source, and people are afraid of it, especially artificial intelligence. But because we didn't use technology to help support dialogue, conflict resolution in the past, but we actually built this idea based on some pieces of research that said, if you use symbols or groups who use symbols to come together to discuss a problem, that they have a significantly higher rate of coming to resolution, to building consensus. And so we started using technology as the crux of, like, how can we really solve some issues here? And so we use artificial intelligence to do that, because the real-time component is, catastrophically going to take us to the next realm in how fast we can understand each other.
Wow. I find that all fascinating. In the pop-up concept, is that something that you will be filming and broadcasting live, or is it only an in-person interaction?
Yeah, but right now we record them only for internal purposes, but the pop-up idea will be so that we can gather, in a public space, lots of ideas. Think of like interviews on the street, right? Where we can get lots of ideas all at once, visualize that, and then broadcast them. Yeah.
Because I'm slower, can you expand upon the visualization piece? How do you take people from the discussion to actually encouraging them or teaching them or guiding them into the visualization process?
Yeah. So we are actually, on our board, we have an artist and an art curator who's like an international art curator who has also focused on art as dialogue and art as a means to dialogue, because it really helps us kind of understand, and it captures our hearts in different ways, right? And so we actually tap into the enormous database of art that already exists, but also generative art in listening to the conversation that people are having in this structured dialogue experience, and then creates unique pieces based on that. Wow. All the perspectives that exist around the table. So if you go to the multarityproject.com, you'll see under the like explore tab, where you could go in and look at past sessions. Some of them that are public are there, and they range from, you know, topics about reproductive rights and time and gun control and policing, anything that, you know, affects us as humans. We don't think that there's nothing that's off limits to us. And so we bring people together and have those conversations, and 100% of the time people say, oh, I understand them better now.
Wow. I want to go to the back to the audience. Another one of our watchers. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe to our channel, Great Employees Matter. We're growing both here, Facebook, Instagram. So please engage with us so that we can get great messages out to the people. But Nancy says, hi, Nancy. It says, it feels to me that up and coming generations, high school age, are less enamored of watching other people's lives with envy, and are understanding a responsibility to be more mindful with social media use. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
And hers is two parts. So I'm going to put another one up after that.
Okay. Yeah. I want that to be true as well. You know,
Man,
that our young people are becoming, and I think the research shows us that too, about this generation that's coming up, that they are, you know, saying, yeah, we're past just watching. And we also are not okay with some of this bashing that happens online, right? And so some of the stuff that was happening 20 years ago with cyberbullying and things, you know, like at the advent of social media, that we're seeing them question that more. And so that's actually one of the things that we're doing, is starting a youth advisory board to make sure that we're tapping into kind of what the youth voice is too, and what they want to talk about and what's important to them, and using this transformative power of imagery that they're generating in real time with each other, to understand kind of where their commonalities are, where the paradoxes exist, you know, and I think they do have that, where they're feeling a little bit more responsible for their for the direction that our world takes, which I hope that that's true.
oh, wow, that's awesome. And then she also says, the young people I encounter seem aware of cyberbullying and just being nicer online, but only more recently it seems new. And I just think she was just adding to her comment. And then I also want to go to Dale, who asked, is it common that you find people are already using many aspects of your process? I find that when I have experienced that event, it straightens my self-image. What do you say to that question?
I'm wondering what I'm trying to understand the last part of that. I find that when I've experienced that, having a dialogue with somebody.
I think that could be what he means. I'm not sure. Hey, Dale, clean up the question for us. I think we're unclear on that. And then Nancy also stated that they seem to be against cyberbullying. Then good, and thank goodness.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we've had so many kind of horrible things that have happened as a result of cyberbullying, that I think we are seeing a shift in that people are saying, all generations, hey, that behavior is not okay. And I think, that's a lot of like the early research around kind of bullying on playgrounds, was that it took not an authority figure to come in and say, hey, that's not okay. It took the kids themselves to stand up for it to begin to stop. And so, we're activating that. That's good.
Yeah.
Now, looking at the climate of our work, because we are talking about employees and great employees, mm-hmm. and employers as well. And, we all know how divided the differences can be between employers and employees.
Yeah.
And the climate of COVID and our country and all the politics that's going on right now. Mm-hmm. What are your suggestions to get us on the right track?
Turn back the clock 20 years.
How do you save the world?
Yeah, I'm trying to softball the question, but I guess it's a really difficult question. But I'm just looking at the dialogue that we have inside with just the dialogue between the employers and employees to be able to get on the same page. And it's not across the board, everybody's on separate pages, but it's the majority of companies, and people are not like it was when I was growing up, where you would get with the company, you would stay with them for life, and then you were able to take care of yourself. Those days are gone. So how would you think better communication is going to help us bridge that and make it better how it used to be, if that's even possible?
Yeah, I think communication, it all comes down to communication, whether that's in your relationship, with your kids, or with your intimate relationship, or with your employees, or with your boss. If we are creating the conditions for us to begin to speak to each other as though each person matters, which is a leap for a lot of people, right? And that we honor their background and their perspective in this idea, even if we're eventually not going to go there, but creating the conditions for people to express themselves, and that they can push back on an idea in a healthy and productive way. I think it really is a major way to help support an environment that grows.
I agree. And I understand Dale's comment now. It was more of a comment. And he was basically saying that when he's already doing what you're teaching, it feels like it makes him feel better. I'm the same way when I'm doing something and I find out, I'm thinking I'm doing something innovative, and I'm like, everybody else is doing that. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'm on the right track there. So I think that's what he means. Yeah.
And I also think that it validates, like, when we have these conversations and we run these dialogue circles, basically, we bring people around a virtual table or a physical one. And what we find is that people understand themselves better. And when you understand yourself better in context with the other people that you're in relationship with, and that might not, often people come together and they don't know the people in the room. But often people will say, wow, I grew in this process.
Can these skills be taught? Can we teach people these various things, or is this a nature versus nurture thing where you're either born with it or not?
Yeah, I believe that we can teach empathy, that it's about our honoring experience and honoring our different perspectives and our ideas and our backgrounds. They say, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, but if you want to learn it, you can learn empathy.
Good point.
You hear that, Lloyd? They can teach old dogs new tricks. I couldn't resist.
I'm not sure that works.
He still can outwit me with his responses.
Lloyd, it sounded like it looked like you were about to say something.
Yeah, I had another question with regards to that. Are there magic words, or are there things that we should be cautious? Some of us, like myself, want to do better and want to learn, but sometimes we just make mistakes. Sometimes in my relationships with my boss or my fellow coworkers, as Kobe said earlier, I don't always communicate well in terms of what I'm thinking. And what are the magic things that we should be looking out for, or the magic things that we should be making sure that we say?
Yeah. And that's one of the things that we teach, is like how to use certain sentence stems. I think the thing is that to say that there are, like trigger words for people, and there are things that like will trigger someone to be on the defensive. And if you're creating the conditions for people to be open and to share their ideas, then there are certain ways that you can ask questions that are helpful for people to be able to share more openly. And so there definitely are, but they're also unique to certain environments. Like I'll just share an example. I have a personal issue with the use of the word division in an organization, to say, well, that division does this and that division does that, because I don't like the word division, because to me it means divided. And so I have this kind of personal thing about that word, but other people don't think of it that way. And so if I were coming into an organization, or an organization that I've led, I would not want to use what I would consider a charged word if that was there. And so I think every organization has its own culture that you need to get in and understand, and build that culture of these are the words that work for us. These are the words that help us generate ideas, that help us question our policies in a way that doesn't have us on the defensive. So I'm not giving you the list of words because I think it's unique, in how we do it. And there are also certainly words that we can say, instead of, well, that doesn't work. Let's, look at it differently. We might just say, like, how might we look at this differently?
Wow.
It's tiny shifts.
Yeah, I love that. I had never thought of the word division and how it could be differently received by people. But you're right. It can set a mood even, right? When you talk about division versus department, or anything else like that. If you don't mind, I want to step back just a second, because one of the first questions I wrote down is as you started speaking. And it was based on a couple of things that you had said, but I'm glad that we had this short conversation on bullying and specifically cyberbullying. My question was going to be, what can be done to prevent or dealing with bullying in the playground? And so I think you addressed that a little bit, but the follow-up question to that is the Multarity Project doing anything, or is there anything that we can help to push forward the concept of providing your services in the school system so we can teach students, right, at a tender age on how to better communicate?
Yeah, I love that you brought it up, because actually we're working with a larger education organization that does work across many districts. And so one of the things that we're doing is going in and working with them around the concept of belonging, and taking these groups from different school systems through this process around belonging, which is, the opposite of bullying, right? That we create space that cares for everybody. And part of that is that we're in the process of developing resources for schools. So we have a couple of educators on our advisory board in different capacities.
Very good. Yeah, I'm glad we're addressing that, because it does begin at a tender age, and there are, I'm sure, many situations where the child just is never introduced to an environment where empathy is important and belonging is important, and that and it's unfortunate that exists, but anything that we can do to head that off at the pass, I think is good, and we're firm believers in education, as you well know.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for taking the Multarity Project that way as well, in that direction.
Yeah, it's been such an interesting process, because one of the communities that we're working with is actually a school in Ukraine. Well, I brought up Ukraine earlier.
Wow.
And it's the start of the school, a new school year. Things have gotten, increasingly dangerous and difficult there. And I find that this particular school are creating an environment of belonging that is unlike what we're seeing the challenges in the United States right now in the school system, where people are turning on each other rather than to each other. And, with the division in school boards and the like, and they really have become, in my eyes, a model for being in one of the most challenging places on earth, right? There are probably two places on earth that are the most challenging, and this is one of them.
Right.
As far as like every day waking up and worried about, is today going to be the day?
Right.
And when we started a meeting with this particular school team, they actually started the meeting telling us that everybody in the room today lost a family member last week.
Wow.
To the war. And so but they're coming to the table with this desire to create a space that cares for kids. And in doing so, they're able to put aside some of the challenges that we see, facing schools right now. And it's just been incredible to watch and be a part of, and a huge honor to be a part of, right? Because they're not turning to a lot of places right now for support because people don't understand like how to come in and work in an environment that is literally at war.
And as we watch newsreels about the war and strife around the world, you don't think of that aspect of it, right? You think of the war, you don't really think about the impact that it has on the daily impact that it has on the people that are in the midst of it and have nothing to do with the war itself, but suffer as a result of the war. So just talking about it, I think, is helpful. So
yeah, and those conversations, and they even said in that process, like, we haven't created the space to have these kinds of conversations. And just creating the space in your organization, doesn't matter if it's a school or a corporation or a leadership team coming together. We've also worked with some mentor groups and other all kinds of different groups. And just creating the space, often people will say, wow, just having the time to do this, because we don't make time for it. But these are the things that help propel us forward when we make the time for our hearts to grow a little bit.
Yeah. Wow.
Can you talk for just a minute about the problems that can't be solved? The problems in the workplace. You have an insolvable problem between a couple of people, and there's just no way to solve it with making them both happy. And how do people communicate about that without getting completely frustrated? I'm sorry, we're just doing the best we can.
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we have a lot of unsolvable problems in our world, right? And so how do we solve what can't be solved is your question, right?
I think my question is more, how do we communicate about it, knowing that it can't be solved without totally making the other person frustrated? Yeah. I know that there's no answer to solving the unsolvable problem, right? It's unsolvable. But then somebody still has to communicate about it. And how do you communicate? I'm sorry, I've heard you, I've listened to you, I've taken what you said into consideration. I just don't think we can make you happy that way.
Right. And sometimes it's not a right fit with an employee in an organization, right? That could be one way, right? But I like to actually think of it as how do we get people to understand each other? Because it's only an unsolvable problem if we walk away shaking our heads in disagreement and not feeling like we are either heard or understood the other person, right?
I agree. And I think a lot of that too is on the person. I think the conversation is on both sides of the coin, because you have to be able to receive that information and you have to be able to be rational about the decision, especially if it's adverse to you. You have to be able to say,
Right.
okay, I have to be able to deal with this rationally and still be able to move on, especially if it's an unsolvable problem. I think that's what you're saying, but I think it involves both people. Both
Yeah.
people have to be important in that conversation.
Yeah. And I think that, I'll give you an example of a conversation that we did around reproductive rights, which is, in a lot of ways, like, people go, oh my gosh, why would you host a conversation about reproductive rights?
That's a hot topic. Yeah, that's a hot topic. You can go either way on that.
Because that is an unsolvable
Right.
conversation, right? Because what we try to do is get the most diverse perspectives around the table. So we don't want to bring people together to just say, oh yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. I agree with you. Right. And so we're trying to bring people together. And so we actually had the most widely diverse perspectives possible in this conversation. And by the end of it, and a lot of it is, the space that's created that allows people to contemplate an aspect of whatever it is the issue is that we're talking about. It gives the space and time to contemplate it, gives the space and time for people to hear from other people. They see that person as a human being with a heart and a background and people that they love and who love them, and that they then we bring in the symbols, that help reflect that, and they see those symbols living in one piece of art together with the other ideas that are present. And every person at that table at the end said, oh wow, I love you guys. How do I stay in touch with you? Even though they had widely different understandings and viewpoints about reproductive rights, but they understood each other in a different way.
Wow. If you can answer this question, if this is an inappropriate question, I apologize in advance. It's not meant to be, but sometimes you just can't talk about it. But how do you fund the Multarity Project, and what can we do to help that?
Yeah, we're actually, we also have a nonprofit arm of our work that we call the Resonance Hub, that is just getting started in the nonprofit realm to receive donations and financial support with grant writing and such. So we have a team actually who we're newly working with in relation to that. We also have done, we do public speaking, which funds some of the work, contract work with different organizations that we then do create contracts and do on the for-profit side. So there are a couple of different places that funding is coming from.
Outstanding. And so, which is a good way into one of our favorite segments of our show, which is SSP. I just made that up.
So, like, what is SSP?
It's a favorite. No, it's shameless self-promotion. And so, is there a way that you want us to reach out or to communicate the nonprofit arm, or let's go ahead and put up the websites and everything that we can do to promote you. The multarityproject.com.
Yeah, multarityproject.com is the way. There's forms there to get in touch about public speaking, about doing workshops, about working with small affinity groups or working with larger diverse groups, doing kind of longer term contract work. That's all there, and that's the best way. And also my email is ginger@multarityproject.com. So I'm the CEO of the work. So I'm always available to talk to people and have conversations about how we can support different work that people are trying to move forward in their organization.
Fabulous. Any closing comments, Lloyd? We'll start with you.
Just an honor to have you on the show. We really do appreciate it. The three of us are about as diverse could be, and we love that kind of message. Love the fact that you're doing this. I learned today. I did not believe that empathy could be taught. I did not learn that communication can bridge a lot of these gaps. Of course, I knew that part of it, but didn't know that it could bridge the emotional gap. And then it can really go ahead and assist in the people. And just for me personally, thank you so much. It's always an honor to speak with you. And I'll pass it over to Kobe.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to say I'm working on my dialogue and my communication on a regular basis. I think I recognize I used to be a corporate manager, so my dialogue was very directional, one way, kind of forced, just do this and go from there. And a lot of times that's not my personality. That's not, and that comes out of my regular work. So I really appreciate you coming in and doing the work that you do with the Multarity Project. I think it's super important. Because at Great Employees Matter, we value the role of employees as catalysts for a big change in the workplace, right? Mm-hmm. And so if we focus there, the environments in the workplace are going to change. So embracing empathy, utilizing data effectively, and encouraging open dialogue, I think are all essential practices for building an inclusive and good environment. So thank you for coming on. I hope that we're able to work with you in the future. We're building some pretty good platforms here where we're going to want speakers to come and do this type of conversation. So just my closing comment is thank you for showing up and thank you for being here. And everybody, please like, subscribe, and go visit her website, and let's stay in the dialogue. That's all I have to say.
And I will close by saying again, thank you so much for us having met you in the first place, and then for agreeing to come on the show. And I suspect that there's going to be opportunities for future shows that you're an invited guest on. And just for the audience, great employees do matter. So greatness, excellence, motivation, all of which you heard here on this show from Dr. Carlson. Keep the faith and continue to grow and improve. And we'll see you all next week at 2:00.
Stand by, Dr. Carlson. Don't jump out. We're just going to get offline. See you guys next week.
An honor. Thank you.
Yep.